Hello and welcome to Doom Does DVD, and this week we're going to do a little deep dive into one particular aspect of my collection and talk about everything related to Star Trek. So why are we talking about this today? Well, there are three reasons really. One, I have recently started the mammoth task of re-watching the entire lot of Star Trek in chronological order. Two, related to that, I recently picked up the Short Treks Blu-ray because that's the only way to watch some of these legally in this country. For some reason, the short treks related to Season 2 of Discovery never got added to Netflix here. And the third reason is this has been on my list of a possible video to make for many years because it was a viewer request. So at this point, everything kind of aligned and I figured it was time to make this video. First, a bit of an introduction. As a preteen kid, I was all about Star Wars. It wasn't until I was sort of my early teens that I was first properly introduced to Star Trek. Somewhere around 1993, 1994, something like that, I think. BBC Two, 6 o'clock, Star Trek The Next Generation. Given the delays there were in TV, first coming from America and then going from paid TV to free TV, that may well have been like the first time that was shown on free-to-air TV in the UK. I'm not entirely sure about that, but it could have been, and either way it was certainly still fairly new at that point. Honestly, my memory of that long ago is a little bit spotty, and it's possible I had at least, heard of Star Trek before then. It's definitely at least a little possible that I'd probably seen a couple of the original series films at that point, most likely the Voyage Home, because I definitely have this memory of watching the Voyage Home but not really understanding the prologue and epilogue bits. It can be taken as a fun time travel adventure, but without having seen The Wrath of Khan and Search of Spock, the deeper context of it doesn't entirely make sense. So I think probably some years earlier that was likely my first introduction to Star Trek, but I don't remember specifically. But it was with these BBC Two early evening showings of The Next Generation that I first properly got into Star Trek, to the point where I was recording them on VHS each week so, I could have them. And of course later that would expand onto Star Trek Deep Space Nine, but by the time Deep Space Nine Season 3 started, I was so deeply invested that I started purchasing the official VHS releases because that was the very first opportunity to get new episodes in this country. And the thing is, I'm pretty sure that these regular visits to go to HMV and buy the latest releases of Deep Space Nine, at which point you would be subjected to all the other things available to buy, that's actually what kind of started my collection. At some point during that process, probably in one of the off seasons, the BBC also showed the original series and I caught up on what had come before. Later would come Star Trek Voyager, and somehow I ended up getting recordings of those from my aunt. Rather than buying them, getting them recorded off Sky One rather than waiting for a BBC showing was a sort of reasonably fast way to go about it. I'm not entirely sure how that arrangement started, I don't remember. But thanks a lot for that, Heather. I know you watch these sometimes, so if you're watching, thank you for doing that. But of course, overall the problem is, because Star Trek is sort of this massive multi-year spanning thing, of which I've been a fan of for many years, my collection of them is very jumbled and disjointed. Because I already had the majority of the series on VHS in some format, either recorded directly from television or the official purchase releases, it's something I took my time on upgrading to DVD. And even when I did, I took my time at that. Starting with The Next Generation, they came out with these fancy looking plastic sets. This is Season 1, and inside is another little sort of box set which folds out for the entire series. But the problem thing is, these were quite expensive. I seem to remember them being nearly as much as £70 a series. So the cost of buying 7 of these series would have been quite expensive. And as someone who was, a not particularly well-off student at the time these were coming out, I didn't actually buy many of them. And so we get to the first inconsistency in my entire Star Trek collection. In the seasons 2 through 7 of The Next Generation, I have in these cheaper cardboard box sets, which came out a bit later. And it's like, I guess at some point I always planned to replace season 1 so they all matched, but it's one of those things I never got round to because it wasn't really a priority. It bugged me slightly that they didn't all match and I can't hold them all at once. That didn't actually affect the content of the series themselves, so I just put up with it. Each of these boxes is just basically just a little slipcase for 4 of these sort of mini disc cases, slimline things. I do have sets which match the majority of the TNG stuff for Voyager and for Enterprise. But the thing is, despite the fact that I would probably say it's my favourite of all of Star Trek, I don't have Deep Space Nine, aside from Season 4. Because I had originally owned all that on official VHS releases, that was the last one I thought about upgrading to DVD. But by the time I got to that point, they had done the HD remaster of the original series and had started working on the remaster of Next Generation. So I held off on upgrading my Deep Space Nine collection with my fingers crossed that they might also remaster that at some point in the future. It is, of course, now many years later, and I still have my fingers crossed. But as I mentioned, given that I'm currently rewatching the entirety of Star Trek, and that a few years ago I finally got rid of my Deep Space Nine VHS, so I don't currently own any copy of Deep Space Nine, so for my rewatch I'm going to need to acquire some. Even though I believe it is on Netflix, but I probably ought to get round to buying the discs, I think, at this point. But anyway, going back to the mention of the remastered versions, let's talk the original series, because I do have the remastered version of those on DVD, which look something like that, and yet again are a bit mismatched. Season 1 and Season 2 come in nice metal cases. For some reason, Season 3 never got that treatment, and it's just in a little cardboard slipcase. Inside, they're all the same 3 plastic sets. I almost bought a copy of this box set that came out for the 50th anniversary, but I was like umming and ahhing and kind of, do I really need it for a long time? And in the end, I decided I didn't. But there is still part of me that kind of wishes I probably should have done, and maybe still might, but for now at least, while it's definitely never, it's fairly low priority. And speaking of remasters, there is of course the HD remaster of The Next Generation. Another one which I think I might have to buy before I get to that point in my Star Trek rewatch. On one hand, I'm sure the DVDs are still fine, but there's probably a lot better picture to be had, especially on a big screen these days, if I upgrade to the fancy new Blu-ray versions. Again, I've had my eye on this complete box set of them for quite a while. A couple of times I almost went for it, but then I noticed a weird thing about the internals of the box set. It's like once you open it up, for some reason it's split up into just 2 giant boxes of Season 1 to 4 and Season 5 to 7, which seems like a really odd way of splitting things up to me. It's something you would never see on the shelf, because it's got a surrounding box, but there's something about it that just doesn't feel quite right to me. So I decided that wasn't for me, and I would have to source the seasons individually. But it also seems at this point, a few years later, some of those seasons aren't entirely readily available, and they're primarily pushing the big box set. So I'll probably end up having to shop around for that one. Oh, and I missed one, going briefly back to the original series. Star Trek the Animated Series. I know I bought this at some point in the past, just generally because I was working to get the complete Star Trek collection eventually. But I'm not actually sure I ever got around to watching it at the time. And I'm not sure, 100% sure, even to this day, that I've seen all of these. But again, this will come up in my rewatch once I get to that point in the timeline. And yeah, these are only on basic DVD. I can't imagine these are ever going to get remastered in any way, shape or form. And I guess at this point we should give a bit of love to the film side of Star Trek. Which again, of course, there are some oddities. So here I have the first 10, which is the original series and the Next Generation films. These are all the basic DVD versions that I've had for a number of years. The motion picture stands out as separate from the others, which are sort of a matching set. The motion picture is the special director's cut version. The rest are all the same series and have a nice cardboard sleeve, with the exception of Star Trek Nemesis, which, matches in design, but doesn't have the sleeve. And while they do have these nice cardboard sleeves, I've ended up always displaying them front end on. One, it's a bit more colourful and you can tell which is which slightly easier, but also because one of the cardboard slipcases is actually for the wrong film. While I've got the discs for The Search for Spock and The Voyage Home, both of the slipcases are for The Search for Spock. Something which I never got around to sorting out at the time, and I doubt I could find a proper slipcase for this now. But the thing is, I do also actually have all those films on Blu-ray as well. This wasn't a purchase I chose to actually make myself. I received this box set as a gift for Christmas a few years back. And it's a set I don't actually know a lot about. Normally I keep a pretty close eye on new releases, but I don't remember ever seeing anything about this. And so it was a complete surprise when I received this as a gift. It's Star Trek 1 through 10, so again just the originals, motion picture all the way through to Nemesis. It appears to be a limited edition. It has a number 1512 out of 5,000. Inside there's a nice book of thing with all the films in. Before I completely get rid of my DVD versions though, I do need to get around to checking that the motion picture and the Wrath of Khan are the director's cuts, not the theatrical cuts. Also comes with a bunch of extra goodies. There's a Starfleet Command patch, print of some sketch from Insurrection, and some other concept photos. Probably the thing that makes it limited is that there's a single film cell from each of the films. Some other bits of storyboards with photos on, schematics of the Enterprise D, and your standard whole book of information about all the films. So yeah, that's quite a nice set to be part of everything. And of course we can't talk about the Star Trek films without at least briefly mentioning J.J. Abrams' Kelvin universe, which is another thing that, because of the entire long time spanning nature of the Star Trek franchise, that I have inconsistencies in, because it was during that time frame that I started making the jump of primarily buying Blu-ray over DVD. And so while I've got Star Trek 09 on DVD, I've got Into Darkness and Beyond on Blu-ray. Finally, as for any of the modern era of Trek, I haven't actually purchased any of that, aside from the aforementioned short treks. A few years ago, after being burned on some TV series, either that got cancelled prematurely or turned out to be a bit rubbish by the end and just didn't stick the landing, I made the decision to stop buying TV series until they were complete, which definitely saved me some money not buying Game of Thrones, for example. Because of that, I haven't got round to buying any of the new Star Trek yet, even though I would probably want all of those to have the complete collection anyway. But still, Lower Decks I don't think even has a physical release yet. That's so new. I don't think Discovery Season 3 does either. And while I could have bought Discovery Season 1 and 2, I was kind of never really in much of a rush to do that. Now, don't get me wrong when I say this. There are a great many things I do enjoy about Star Trek Discovery, but if you asked me to rank all the different Star Trek series in preference order, which I'm not going to do, but if I did, something would have to be at the bottom, and I think I would have to put Star Trek Discovery there. Now, that's still way above a lot of other TV series that I wouldn't even consider watching in the first place, but it's still the least favourite, still my least favourite of all the Star Treks. It's been a bit of a sort of a mix so far, and I'm kind of hoping that it'll sort of more settle down for season 4. And I had similar feelings about Picard. While it started out great, it kind of petered off, and while it's great television, it's not the best Trek. And so those are things that I will very likely buy eventually, but it's not the most important thing to me right now. And so I think that's about it. That quite possibly was a bit more of a disjointed ramble about Star Trek than I kind of originally planned, but that kind of thematically mirrors the disjointed nature of the collection itself. It seems unlikely that unless we get to something crazy like the 100th anniversary of Star Trek, that we'd ever get some kind of nice matching box set of everything. Especially seeing as of Discovery Season 3, there are now over 800 episodes. So while, as I mentioned, there are definitely some areas of my collection that I would like to upgrade and maybe make a little bit more consistent, for the most part, it's just something I'm happy to have because it's been such a big part of my life for so many years. And one of the main reasons I even started collecting film and TV on DVD in the first place. If you have any questions or comments about my collection of Star Trek or Star Trek itself, leave those down in the comments below. Also, if there are any other aspects of my collection you would like me to do a specific spotlight on, to ask me about those in the comments below. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again next time.